People with psychosis are part of a vulnerable community. And by vulnerable, I mean these are people who can't very well take care of their basic needs without help. They may not be safe by themselves. And I know these things apply to me personally. And I know that as a result of being in this vulnerable population, I was subject to legal ramifications. That's right, there were consequences legally for things that happened in psychosis that were outside of my control. And I just want to take a moment to preface this video with a bit of a, reality check. And that is to say that despite the ever-present stigma that people with psychosis are inherently violent, even just for having psychosis, this is generally not the case. If you look at the statistics of violence within the population of people with psychosis versus that of the general population, there is really not that much of a difference. It is only slightly more common, and it's not even common at all. Like, the odds that a person in psychosis will commit violent acts are very, very slim. It is actually more likely that a person in psychosis will receive harm and be victims of violence, which absolutely was the case for me, which is why there were legal troubles surrounding my psychotic episode. Today, I want to get into the, nitty-gritty of the legal system as it pertained to me in psychosis. I want to tell you about my experience being preyed upon by a predator in psychosis and how that led to legal ramifications. Before we get started, I would like to put a trigger warning on this video to say that psychosis in and of itself is a sensitive subject that may at times be difficult to talk about. So if at any point during today's video I may say anything that is triggering or upsetting to you, you are more than welcome to leave the video. In this video specifically, I will be talking a bit about abuse, so if that is not your cup of tea, you are more than welcome to leave. Also, a disclaimer to say that I am not a mental health care professional, and I am in no way qualified to give any advice, medical, psychiatric, or otherwise. Who I am simply is a person living with serious mental illness who is here to share with you the wisdom and insight I've gleaned along my journey of mental health recovery. So right out the gate, I'm just going to fast forward to the end of my legal debacle, or rather like the end-ish of my legal debacle, to tell you what exactly was determined about my mental state, because it's very important that you know what exactly my mind was going through that required me to go through this process. So I was deemed mentally incapacitated in court, which is basically a way of saying that I could not make my own decisions with reasonable discretion. Basically, I couldn't make any legal decisions with a sound mind, therefore they didn't hold, right? So legal decisions that I had made had to be absolved because I was not able to consent to these decisions. I did not technically consent. People have gotten really up in arms about whether I had the ability to consent, but according to the courts, I could not. During my worst psychotic episode of 2018, I was very susceptible to harm. I was very easily swayed, I was very impressionable. My reality was malleable, as I like to say, because it could be easily formed either by my beliefs or by beliefs imposed upon me by other people. And when you have people around you who see that you are easy to manipulate, they will manipulate. And I, of course, attracted a predator in my mental state of being mentally incapacitated, and I had no defenses. I could not protect myself from anyone, especially other people who had terrible motives to harm me, take advantage of me, and marry me. Yeah, I was in a really bad place. I was couch surfing. I had been evicted from my apartment and was just kind of bouncing from place to place. I happened to bounce onto the couch of a guy that I didn't really know that well. I'd actually been in a crisis care center with him. That's where I met him. And in that crisis care center, years before, I had told him about my story of having schizoaffective disorder and how I had recurrent psychotic episodes and how I tended to get hospitalized for them, how I was so sick of being hospitalized. And he told me in that crisis care center in 2015 that I would never have to be hospitalized again if I didn't want to. And I really latched onto that hope, not realizing that what he meant by that was you should forego any care that you need because hospitals are this stigmatized, terrible place to go. Like, this will come up later, but basically, I had disclosed to this guy in a sound state of mind in 2015 that I had a psychotic disorder, that I had episodes of psychosis, and this is what they looked like. And 3 years later in 2018, when I happened upon him in a Walmart and told him my situation and I was psychotic and he let me stay on his couch, he knew all of this and went along with it and kind of roped me into a relationship. And it was kind of chaotic from the start. Now, this video is not necessarily about the relationship I had with this man, who we'll call Chip. It's about the consequences of that relationship. So I will just kind of give the cliff notes about what happened in that relationship, because honestly, we really don't need to get too far into the details to paint a picture of what was going on that was wrong in this relationship. And I'll just start with the marriage itself, with the wedding day, because even from the jump, it was an illegitimate marriage. So as I said, I ran into Chip in a Walmart. I was psychotic, and I told him about my whole not exactly being housed situation, and he allowed me to stay with him. And this turned into a relationship pretty much immediately. We dated for 1 week. He proposed to me. I accepted. And a week later, we were married. This is not in the least what I wanted. Even close, not at all. So basically, I normally would never say yes to marrying a person I've been dating for 1 week. That is so uncharacteristic of me. But in Psychosis, you must understand that I believed there were demons after my soul, right? And they were going to possess me. I also believed that Chip was God, and this was going to save my life. If I married God, he'd be able to protect me from the demons. So this wasn't exactly a marriage founded on love so much as a dire need to save my soul. And therefore, as you can tell, it was not a sound decision that I made with reasonable discretion. This is a very classic example of how a person with psychosis can not exactly be held responsible for their decisions. In my mind, I was saving my life. In reality, I was legally binding myself to another person that would abuse me. This would not have happened if I weren't psychotic, but of course, because I was susceptible to harm. Our marriage was illegitimate from the start. The first thing that went wrong in this marriage that was not legally sound was the fact that we forged the signatures on our marriage certificate. There was no one in attendance at this wedding, if you can call it that. It was the two of us standing in a gazebo with a man who claimed to be Biker Santa. That's what he told us to call him. And we'd found him on Craigslist the day before. It was not that legit, honestly. I don't want to bash on anyone who wants a small wedding with kind of a really casual vibe, but we didn't have witnesses. There were no witnesses. It was literally the three of us. And so when it came time to sign the document, this legal document, there were no witnesses to sign. So we forged fake names, and that is in and of itself not exactly legal. The other thing that made our marriage illegitimate was me being mentally incapacitated. And again, this meant that I was legally unable to consent to marriage. And this is another legal area I would like to touch on because it's very important to understand consent laws. Consent is basically being able to make a decision for yourself. And there are times when people are unable to make that decision, whether it's because they are a minor and they are too young to consent to whatever it may be. Maybe they're inebriated, they are not in the right frame of mind to be able to consent to whatever it may be. People who are unconscious cannot obviously consent if they're not awake to make a decision. So things happen against their will. And so what I'm getting at is that a lot of people tend to think of consent in the realm of sex. They think of non-consensual sex, sexual assault. Consent goes so much farther beyond that. And there are more areas of consent that people aren't necessarily aware of. I've been called out for saying that I was not able to consent to marriage because people would say things like, "You're an adult, you consented." And the thing is that outside of the frame of mind that allowed me to employ reasonable discretion, I legally am not able to make those decisions for myself. I, for instance, have had caregivers in the past who helped me because I could not help myself. So consent laws apply to a lot more than just sexual assault, and a lot of consent does have to do with legality. If you can't make your own legal decisions, you can't consent. So it's so much broader than what people tend to think of it as. It can be very legal too. And that's just the start of the marriage. We're already dealing with not having any witnesses, not having legitimate signatures. The signatures have been forged. One of the participants is mentally incapacitated. It is non-consensual from the beginning. There is already a lot going on legally that is not okay with this marriage, but it was once I was in the marriage that it got worse. Because I've had multiple psychotic episodes, it has been proven that I am not always safe, and there have been protective measures that have been put in place to protect me in the event such as this, where I am unable to protect myself. This is just thinking ahead, right? My mom has been my caregiver through 2 of my psychotic episodes. And in the second one, she realized that I needed legal protection. I just needed protection in general. For instance, I wear a medical alert bracelet. My mom had gotten me a medical alert bracelet in Psychosis when I started wandering away from home and getting picked up by police. She also got a power of attorney, and she was I don't know the name of the person, kind of forgot, but she was the person who was in charge. Like, she was the person on my power of attorney looking out for me, who was able to help me through decisions I could not make for myself. So she was in charge of my finances. I think maybe she got the wrong power of attorney because there is a mental health one, but I realize now that she had the financial one. Nonetheless, she had a legal document protecting me. She was the person to make decisions on my behalf in the event that I was incapacitated and then unable to do so myself. And the situation I was in with Chip was exactly what this document was in place for. This was literally the circumstance in which this had been placed. Like, this is the entire purpose. But Chip found a way around that, and Chip managed to have my power of attorney undone. When Chip found out that I had this power of attorney, he became obsessed with it. And it really, really, really frustrated him that it was in place at all. He told me that my mom was trying to control me and manipulate me, and that she was bad for me, and that she had me under her thumb, and that, as long as I was, under her control, I was not safe, which honestly, if you flip it, it kind of says a lot about him actually. But nonetheless, he wanted it undone so badly. He was really determined to have this taken care of. So we went to a notary, and he instructed me in how to act and what to say and what to do so that this would be taken care of smoothly. And I now realize that he was instructing me to pass. I was able to get through that situation seemingly normal, and no one detected that I was actually, by the very nature of the document, unable to undo this document. The only grounds on that document for me not being able to undo that document are the ones in which I am mentally incapacitated. Oh my God. So yeah, he had me acting like I was, sane, sound of mind, And because I was kind of puppeteered into getting through that interaction, the very situation in which that absolutely should have been protected was undone. And that just still bothers me. And yeah, that wasn't exactly the correct power of attorney to begin with, because it should have been the mental health one that granted my mom permission to handle any decisions on my behalf pertaining to my mental health. I mean, this was like the financial one. It still had an effect because, you know, I've never really, I don't know, now I have control of my money, but before then I never really had control of my finances. My mom helped me with that because I was pretty unwell and unable to manage my own money. So that was something that was important, that was undone. And he did take advantage of me financially because he had me close my bank account. He had me open a shared account with him. He wouldn't let me have any of the money in the account. He took my card so that I couldn't spend any of the money in the account. I wasn't allowed to look at the account. I had nothing to do with the account. It was basically his account that my money went into that I was not allowed to use. He wouldn't let me even have $5. Like, I would have to ask permission. Hey, I'm going to go to McDonald's with my friends. Can I have $10? No, but you can have something off the dollar menu, you know, things like that. Like I wasn't allowed to spend money. I mean, even when I did actually go to McDonald's and I got like a $5 meal, and he was furious that I didn't buy something cheaper. And that was maybe the only time I can think of that he actually gave me money. I got gift cards for my birthday and he took those too. I spent like $20 off a gift card and that was a whole thing. So the financial abuse was pretty intense, which was part of the reason I couldn't leave. But the main reason that I couldn't leave was, as you can tell by now, the mental incapacitation. That's why I threw that in way at the beginning of the video, because that is the whole theme, was the state I was in, being too vulnerable to care for myself, make decisions, etc. I was really sick and unable to come out of psychosis. He didn't seem to want me to get well. As I said at the beginning of the video, when I'd initially met him, he had said, "You don't ever have to go to a hospital again if you don't want to." And I had free will when he said that. I could have made that decision for myself, but being legally bound to this man, he basically made decisions for me that were not very safe for me. He chose to keep me out of the hospital, and I tried to go. I didn't know that I was psychotic, and I didn't know that anything was wrong with me, other than I thought there was something wrong with my body because I had somatic delusions, which are basically delusions that you might have something going on, maybe medically or otherwise, that's wrong with your body. And I would beg him to take me to the hospital, and he refused. He kept saying, I swore to myself I would never do that. And so I actually stayed psychotic for months and months and months into this marriage. Here is another important legal point to note, and this will come up later. I never came out of psychosis in that marriage. I got a little bit better towards the end, but I didn't come out of psychosis until after that marriage. So if I were to have recovered in that marriage and stayed married, things might have gone differently. But because I was mentally incapacitated the entire time, I was actually able to get out of the marriage. The thing is, as you remember, probably from the beginning, I thought I had married God, and I was miserable in this marriage. I was scared of him, still am. I really needed to leave. I needed to be safe. I needed to recover, and he was not going to let me. So what actually happened that kick-started me getting out of this marriage was running away in the middle of the night. He wouldn't let me go to the hospital, so one night I simply ran away from home. I hitchhiked into town in the middle of the night. I made it into the downtown and wandered around until the sun came up, came across a police officer, begged her for help, and she took me to the mental hospital. I don't know where I'd be today if I hadn't done that. I don't know how I was even able to think to do that. It took so much bravery to be able to do that. I think to this day that's the most life-saving decision I've ever made. So I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't, but I did manage to run away, get into town, and make it into a hospital. And thank God I did, because I was medicated. And medication is the only thing that brings me out of psychosis. He was furious that I was in the hospital. He did not like that I was coming out of psychosis. And I still think that's pretty scary, actually. He literally didn't like that. And he was quite vocal about that as I started to recover. He really didn't like that. So that was the life-saving event that allowed me to start to get better. And though I was still psychotic, I did begin to gain insight, and I became aware that I had not married God and that I was psychotic, and I didn't know when it was going to end, but I was terrified and I was in a really bad situation, and I was married, holy cow, and I had to do something about it. I went to my dad. My dad is a lawyer, and I was scared. I was like, I don't know what to do. And my dad, the genius that he is, suggested an annulment. A lot of times when people think of annulment, they tend to think of Catholic annulments, but I went through a legal annulment, which is somewhat different. I really don't know anything about Catholic annulments, so I can't speak on that. But my annulment was a legal procedure in which my marriage was absolved because it was an illegitimate marriage. I qualified for an annulment because I met certain grounds. I was mentally incapacitated, and that is one grounds for annulment. There's also marrying a minor, a marriage of polygamy, incest, being inebriated at the time of marriage, duress. For me, there were some specific circumstances that granted me this annulment that are really key to note. First being that I had hefty evidence of my mental state, because thank God I ran away to the hospital. I was able to have this massive document from the hospital detailing everything that I was saying and doing while I was that sick. And that made it abundantly clear that I was not well and that I, was psychotic. I was psychotic the duration of the marriage. There was never a point that I was not psychotic. So if it had been the case that I'd been psychotic like the first couple of months and then stayed in the marriage for like a year, I don't think the annulment would have been granted, honestly, because I can't quite remember. It's very hazy because this was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But, because I was unwell the entire time, it really proved my case. And, even with all of this evidence and, how abundantly clear it was that I was not well, my husband stood by the fact that he thought I was okay, that he thought it was okay to marry me because I seemed fine. The judge said to him, and this is verbatim, I kid you not, I will never forget this interaction. The judge said to him, "How could you possibly have thought this woman was fit to be married?" And my ex-husband said, "I just thought she was quirky." I wish I could say it stopped there, but it certainly did not. There's really only one other component to this story, and this is actually more like the consequence of the consequences, because now we've detailed how mental incapacitation works, how consent works, how forging legal documents is not okay, how, illegitimate marriages can be undone, and not through divorce, but through annulment. Now, that stuff was all because of my psychosis. And I think it's fair to say that the legal ramifications of the psychosis stopped there, but there were further legal ramifications of the relationship with Chip, because he continued to harass me after the marriage. He would send me threatening text messages. He was still very abusive even after I had left him. He would not leave me alone. He was constantly bombarding me and invading my space, and it was kind of scary. He still scares me. As I said, he's a really angry guy. And so I did continue through ending things with him by getting a no contact order, which was kind of strange. This is another area that I'm a little hazy on because I didn't even understand what was going on then. But I think that because my marriage was annulled, they didn't treat it like a domestic violence no contact order. It was just treated as a civil no contact order. Now, I'm probably completely embarrassing myself to anyone who understands law because I don't. And I think that maybe if I had, I could have gotten a proper no contact order. But when I went to court, it was really just people talking about how their neighbors were spying on them. And I was the only one there who was trying to get out of a domestically violent situation. So I'm not exactly sure that went the way it was supposed to, but what do I know? It's all over now, and that's all I care about. I know to many people who hear my story, it sounds kind of far-fetched. I know when I first spoke about my marriage publicly, people were accusing me of lying and making it up because there's no way in that how that possibly happened. But I got just as many comments from people saying this exactly happened to me. This is literally exactly the thing that I went through. And a lot of those people ended up going through divorce. I was fortunate enough to have a lawyer in my family who advised me to get an annulment. That made my life a lot easier because I'm sure the divorce would have been very scary. And, I'm just here to say that there are protective measures people can take to prevent themselves from falling into situations like mine. And unfortunately, mine didn't succeed, right? Like my power of attorney was undone, but I have safety measures in place again now that I feel more secure about. My fiance, John, has a mental health advance directive and power of attorney in place for me so that he can make decisions on my behalf. And that really works for us. I've been in the hospital so many times since we've been together. And fortunately, I've never been incapacitated like I was before, where he's had to use those measures. But I'm really grateful that they're there just in case, because the fact alone that I keep going into the hospital in this relationship just says this is not the end. Like, this is something I'll live with my entire life. And the odds that I go psychotic again are there. It's not impossible. So to anyone out there, as I said, I don't really give advice, but I would say that, legal measures like advance directives and powers of attorney and whatnot I've found to be very helpful, so long as you don't end up with a predator who has you undo them. That would be the only stipulation I would have. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching my video. I truly appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you've ever faced any legal consequences from your own psychosis, or if you've helped a loved one through legal consequences related to their psychosis. Also, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications to my future videos if you want to support my channel. You can also support my channel by checking out my merch shop. There should be ads running below. I designed everything myself because I love digital art and I really like to draw. What else? I put out videos Thursdays/Fridays. So if you want to see any more of my content, there will be plenty coming soon. And I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks. Bye. So close your eyes.